Hello everyone, good morning. Welcome to March. It is my first live back with everyone. I do see I have a couple of people that just joined, so we're going to get started. Today we are going to work with the Zentangle pattern in Zeppel, which is one of my very favorites. You can see here I have a couple different tiles within Zeppel included. I'm going to show it in a few different formats, a few different ways and variations of drawing this. I hope everyone has your favorite drink ready and your tangle supplies handy. We are going to dive right in. It's really good to be back. I have missed everybody, so let's get started. Alright, so I'm going to grab a tile. I'm going to move these off to the side. I've got some tiles right here. So we're going to take one and we're going to start with our dots. Just one in each corner. And then we are going to connect them. So we're going to take our pencil and we're going to just draw a line, turning my tile. Not really worrying too much about whether or not it's straight or straight-ish. You can make them curved if you want to, or wavy. Let's see here. Alright, I'm just going to come in a little closer and make sure I'm all nice and focused. I changed my lighting setup a little bit the past couple weeks while I was out trying to keep on top of stuff a little bit, but so hopefully you can see a little bit better. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to do in Zeppel in a grid format. Okay, so I'm going to take my micron and I'm going to make a line. I find it easiest to draw towards myself. Some people prefer to draw away from themselves. So whatever you whichever direction is most comfortable for you, that's the direction you should be drawing in. Hi everybody, I see Bonnie and Catherine and Tammy and Deborah. I feel like the lady on Romper Room, she never said my name, so I just said all of yours. But welcome, I'm really glad to see everybody here. And like I said, I'm really glad to be back. I am doing okay. I'm still a little tired, so I probably won't keep this one super long today, but we're getting there. So I have my line down the center here, and now I want to kind of divide these sections up into similarly sized sections. So I'm going to kind of divide this one in half. And then I'm going to go right along near where my border is. And you can see I have a couple of little sections. I'm going to flip my tile over because I always find it easiest, like I said, to draw towards myself. And now I have these little rows. I'm going to turn my tile a half turn and go right down the center again. I say right down the center, it's more center-ish. If you notice, it's slightly to the left. I have a tendency to do that. And then again, I'm going to divide this up. And as you can see, my pencil border's just, fading into the background. And now I have a grid of boxes. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we are going to create a diagonal line in each of these spaces. Okay, so you can choose to start wherever you'd like. I'm going to go right here just because I always find it easiest to start somewhere towards the middle. And I'm going to make diagonal lines from corner to corner. You could, of course, start here and draw your line straight down, but I find that you don't get as nice a result if you do that. So I do mine individually. I like to try and make them meet as close as I possibly can to the corners. And turn your tile to keep your hand comfy. You don't want to get any muscle fatigue. Okay, so there's my grid that's divided up now really into each little cube or square has been divided into two little triangles. This is a great method of doing things like you could add paradox to any of these. You could add really any kind of pattern in your grid. But today we're going to do in Zeppel, and I find this to be a really fun pattern. I tend to draw it with more of a wonky grid, and I will demonstrate that next. But I always like to do it in a nice straight grid-like example first, just because I think that for a lot of people this is much easier, and once you understand the concept, you'll find that you can do some really amazing things with this. All right, so I'm going to come down here. And I am going to, so basically I'm going to go around this shape. So I am creating a rounded shape that's just kind of being squished inside that little triangle. So I want you to think about creating something like a water balloon or a soap bubble, and you're smushing it into the shape that's there. Okay, so this is your framework right here, and I'm going to go around and I'm going to smush this in here. Okay, I like to do them, if I'm doing it in a grid, I like to do, one row at a time. And you can vary this a lot by how small you leave your little spaces, and whether or not you color them in. I tend to not color them in because it gives you this almost cobblestone effect. But if you do color them in, you get a completely different look, and we'll play with that a little bit. I'm going to turn my tile, and now I'm going to do the other side. So I'm squishing that soap bubble or that balloon right into that space. I suppose it wouldn't have to be a water balloon, it could be a regular balloon. And you see how my lines aren't exactly always hitting the grid line, and that's okay, that's part of the charm of this. So I'm going to quickly do another row of this. What's nice about this pattern too is that it is a good fill pattern for when you have a fairly big space that you want to fill up with a pattern. By drawing some big grid spaces, you can make some larger patterns, like larger little, I tend to think of these a lot like pebbles. Once they're drawn, I always think they look like cobblestones, which is why I think of them as pebbles. So as I make each one of these, right, I think, I want to kind of stack them together. So you can see how they might look like little rocks or little stones. I'm going to now shade so that you can see how I shade these. I tend to like to shade mine on the left, and so to do that, I'm going to start right here, and I'm going to lay down just a little bit of graphite. So I'm kind of making a line of graphite right along the edge. I usually come up just a little tiny bit, So I'm kind of making almost like a C shape on the left hand side. Now to do these next ones, I'm still going to make kind of that C shape. And now I'm going to, and I think this is one of those patterns that the shading makes it. When you add shading to it, that's where you start to get these magical properties. Okay, so now I'm going to take my tortillon and I'm going to soften that edge, and I'm going to pull my graphite into this little stone. So I'm just bringing some over and I'm just kind of softening it around, and I'm leaving a white highlighted kind of area in the center. And then I'm going to do the same on the one right underneath it. So I'm just going to work my way around, soften that up. So you can see how these now take on a lot of dimension. I like to actually use these with my watercolors even. I will paint in Zeppel to do any kind of roads or garden stones or anything like that. Just because using the same premise and the same shape, I can get some really lovely little rocks. Okay, so I'm going to do this next row. So again, I'm creating a line, bringing a little bit over so that I get kind of like a C, or, you know, sometimes if I don't want them as shaded, I'll do more like an L. So I'd go straight down and then I'd just bring a little bit over like that. And then I just usually always try and shade them the same way. And you could shade on the right, or you could shade just on the top and the bottom. It's really a matter of personal preference. This is just the way I tend to shade them. I don't love this tortillon, so I'm going to swap that out. Sometimes, even in the same package, you'll get tortillons that you'll love some and you won't like others. And I'm not really sure why that is. Just something with the paper texture, I guess. So you can see how these come together really quick. If you are looking to add color or something like that, these little Zeppels turn into great little gems. There's a lot you can do with them. All right. So I am going to set this one off to the side. I'll finish this later for my pattern sheet, but I want to move on to the next. So right here you can see this. This is actually a pattern. It's called Boulder Builder. That was by Bunny, who was a CZT, who sadly is no longer with us. But I love this pattern. And it's really fun to mix it with Zeppel. And you can see here I did it with a Wonky grid of Zeppel. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. So again, I'm going to take my pencil and make my dots, add my border. For those of you that are new, I tend to use a mechanical pencil. I like the skinny little leads. And I often use Mozart mechanical pencils. This just happened to be one I had handy today. But really the lead is not all that different than what you would find in any pencil. I just happen to like those particular ones. Tammy, this pattern, it's called Boulder Builder. And I'll put a link to the step out for that in the chat after. So you can find it. All right, so now I am going to come into my tile and I am going to make a line straight across my tile, and it's kind of at an angle, and I'm not really paying all that much attention to which way it's going to go. I'm going to add several of these. I'm going to let them crisscross a little bit. Okay. I'm now going to turn my tile and I'm going to go in the opposite direction so that I have a grid kind of going in all different directions. Okay. I did not close in my outside border, but I have my pencil lines to work in. So now I'm going to come in and I'm going to pick one of my little squares, though they're not really squares this time. They're more, so we've got some triangles, we've got some big shapes, we've got some small shapes. I tried to make it so that they would be about the same size as these, just so that they are, so you can kind of see the difference in them, and plus then they go pretty quickly. But changing up the size of the pattern, making them big and small, really can change up a whole lot. I have, let's see, let me see if I have an example here. So for instance, in this one, this is I shaded this with some Renaissance colors, but if you notice here, I made much smaller grid and then a larger grid to work together, and you get a really cool variation on that. So I did want to show you that. All right, back to our wonky grid. I'm going to pick a shape. I'm going to come in and I'm going to squish in that balloon, and I'm going to do that in every space I've got. And you can see how when these aren't divided up into little triangles, that they actually look almost more stone or pebble-like. And you get these cool variations. I tend to let my pen round things really nicely as I go, so I don't worry about making it a straight line, because again, I tend to think of my my water balloon, my squishy little soap bubble, getting shoved into this little framework, right? So I know there's going to be little gaps and things like that, and I think it adds to the charm of the pattern. And again, this one comes together really, really quick, and it's really, really fun to draw. And it's funny, when I was trying to decide what patterns to share with you this month, I looked, and I had to look a couple times to see if I'd done a full live on Zeppel, and I was really surprised to see I hadn't, because it's one I use a lot in my own work. You get these neat little kind of crisscrosses in between, and like I said, you can color them in if you want to, but I tend to not. The original pattern calls for not coloring them in, and I've always kind of stuck with that. It does look cool if you do, but I think it changes something, and it's just not quite the same, and I really like it the way that it is. See, I have these little gaps where my pen just kind of doesn't fit exactly within that line, and I really embrace that with this pattern. Just kind of add a little bit of a curve to it as I draw it. I wanted to draw one whole tile, which I don't normally do. I don't usually finish a whole tile while I'm on camera, but I wanted you to see how quickly this one comes together, because so often we don't have that luxury or that opportunity to draw a whole tile. There we go. So there we have our kind of wonky, fun, fun gridded freeform, I guess you would say, in Zeppel. We can shade it the same way. This time I'm actually going to shade on the top and the bottom, and that could be whichever way I want it to be. So I'm going to flip the tile over this way. No, I actually think I liked it better like this. So now I'm just going to add some graphite to the top. Of each of my little stones. And you can see I'm only adding pencil on the top. So now I'm going to come in. Oh, I missed this little one right there. So now I'm going to come in and I'm just going to kind of soften it. And I'm really just kind of smudging it. I don't want to add a ton to it. I just want a little something. And some people tend to use their tortillon and they make little circles. And you can certainly do that. I tend to use mine more like I would the side of a pencil. I'm softening it, adding a little bit of dimension, maybe kind of rounding those corners. But I'm not doing a ton with it. And you can see my shading is a little darker down here, and that's because I have so much graphite on my tortillon. So the reason that I only added the graphite on the top when I said I was going to shade on the top and the bottom is because I have so much graphite on here now, I don't need to add anymore. I can just come in with my tortillon and use the graphite that's already there to just add a little bit of a smudge on the bottom of each of these, and it's much lighter because I don't have any actual, I didn't lay down any graphite. I'm just working with what I already had. So you can see I've just got these. It's kind of like a really soft little shadow. It's also a pretty good way to clean off your tortillon. You can clean off your tortillon by just rubbing it on the back of your tile or some scrap paper. You can use sandpaper, or I tend to like to use an emery board, just something that you can have, handy. So then I like to look at them and try and decide, am I happy with these little stones the way that they are? Do I want to add any of the, do I want to add anything to any of these? So these bigger stones, the one right here, the one here, maybe this one, I'm going to come in with the graphite that's already there, and I'm going to just kind of accent, some of these edges on just a couple of these little stones. So where I have like a little quirk in it, maybe I'll just emphasize it. And that, right up here, I have a lot of graphite right in that corner, so I just kind of smudged it a little bit. And it's a little bit intuitive. You just kind of play with it until you're happy with it, but you can do a whole lot with your shading to get some really neat, really fun little pops. So now we have done a structured and an unstructured in Zeppel. Now we are going to do a couple little fun things with it. I always try and show you some ways to use it that maybe you might not have before or you didn't think about. All right, so right there I have done my border. I am going to come in here and I want to talk about the fact that you can use it as a background. So obviously you can use it as a border. I probably am not going to demonstrate that. I think you can see just by looking at this how making it tiny would give you a really cool border. But let's say we wanted to, what shall we make? Let's see, let's make a mocha. Time to switch out the pen. I found that over the last couple weeks I was really hard on my pens, and I have a whole stack of them kind of sitting here that I really kind of beat up, so I wasn't sure which was what. That's much better. Alright, so now I have a mocha drawn there, right? I'm going to bring this edge down right here, and then maybe I'm going to add a pearl right in the center there. so that I have something that's kind of like the forefront of my design. So now I want to go in and I'm going to create a grid on a diagonal, but I'm going to make this grid kind of behind my muka. So I'm using the hollow bomb method to kind of jump over anything I've already drawn. Let me re-emphasize right there where my pen stopped working. And you notice I'm just kind of eyeballing it. I'm not using any tools to line anything up. I'm just making my little lines. And you can see I went smaller than I did on the others. I'm going to turn my tile, and now I'm going to jump over. I'm not going to do the whole thing. I'm just going to do a small portion, and then I'll finish the tile for you for later. Okay, so I'm going to do one more line, just because this one can go mostly straight. There. And now I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to, I could just do in Zeppel in these little squares, or I can divide it into my little, and I think I will, my little triangles. So I'm dividing each of these little squares, these little cubes, into a couple little spaces. Like I said, I'm not going to do the whole thing. I don't want to take up your whole Saturday. And remember, some of this you're not going to be able to see. It's going to be behind, and that's okay. Okay. Now I'm going to go in, and I'm going to squish in my little water balloons. And now you can squish it so that it fills like that little space, or you could squish it so that it fills, you know, so that it looks like it's behind. So you could, I could treat this as one shape using the hollow bomb method, or I could actually squish in little ones in each spot, which is what I tend to do. Okay, so I'm just going to go in and I'm going to fill in all these little spots. And I'm not going to fill the whole thing. I'm just going to do right around that that muka we put in there. And I'll come back and I'll, like I said, I'll finish the tile later. But this creates a really cool background, and a lot of people don't think about adding in a pattern to create a background. You can see how I kind of just went around there and emphasized that little shape, right? Like that. And this is just this little spot there, and that kind of takes on almost like a little jelly bean space shape, I should say. Fit these all in. Just do a couple on the outside here. Like I said, I don't want to do a ton of fill in, because I think once you've seen it, it's kind of clear what I'm going to be doing. Right? So now I'm going to come in, and then I would add my shading. And again, I find when there's a lot going on, that I tend to gravitate towards my, oh, I missed one right here. I tend to gravitate towards my basic, simplest shading, which, like I said, is always that kind of C or L shape on the left-hand side. So I'm going to put those little bits of graphite, and you can see this is that I did this pattern smaller this time, and that it does change the way that it looks. So I'm just kind of really quickly touching on the ones that I've finished. Okay, and then I take my tortillon, soften that up. Normally I would do my shading at the end, but I want you to see how this all kind of works together. I do these lives every Saturday at 11:30. They do stay up on my page for those that are wondering. I don't take them down, so that gives you the opportunity if you didn't get a chance to watch on Saturday, or if you had to leave early, or if you go back to play with the pattern and to practice it and you want to watch again, you can certainly do so. I slowly move them also over to my website, which is whimsybykelly.com, and I am in the process of also adding them to my YouTube page. I'm not sure how many live videos Facebook lets me keep up, so I wanted to make sure that I wouldn't lose them for you. So those are places that you can always look for them. I'm not teaching a ton of classes this month. I do have a Celtic Illuminations class, which is Celtic letters with some tangling and some metallic work, if you are interested. And then I will have my Facebook Lives. I am also teaching a cool masterclass for with a CZT program. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to reach out to me and I can send you the information. So you can see how this works as a background. And now I'm going to come in and I'm going to shade actually over that. So I just added a little bit of graphite on the outside of my muka. And then I'm going to soften that so that it looks like it is casting a shadow on these little cobblestones that we made. And then I'll come in and I'll actually shade up my muka when I have the tile all completed. So there's your demonstration of doing it as a background. If you have seen several of my lives or you come on most Saturdays, you know that one of the things that I love to do is I love to turn patterns into flowers. So we're going to do that too. So I am going to create kind of this cubist little flower. So what I'm going to do is I am going to take my pencil and I'm going to kind of treat this like I'm making a string. So I'm going to make a little square shape in the center, and I am going to turn my tile and I am going to stack some more little cubes around the outside. So these, I'm not making any effort to make them perfectly square. I'm not making any effort to make them any specific size. I kind of want them to be a little wonky. I'm going to come in here with my pen and I am going to, once I have them, so that I have, it's actually 6 little boxes around one big box. It could be more or less. I'm going to come in and I'm going to kind of ink in those little boxes. I did them first kind of as a string, but now that I know that I kind of know where I want to work, I can ink them in. And now I'm going to divide each of them into my 2. Okay, so I have my my little divided line. I'm actually going to come in and I'm going to add another line. So I'm creating like an X in my box. And now I'm going to take my pen again, and I'm going to squish in my little shape into each of these little triangles. And you can see these almost look like little tiny flowers. You have the option to add some like little tipple or little tiny orbs or something in the center and kind of connect this all together so that it could be one large flower. Or my favorite way of doing this is a fun way to bring in a little bit of color. You could shade with a colored pencil, or you could I always think these look like little violets. Once I have these done, so now I see this like a little cluster of flowers. You can almost make a little leaf shape coming out in different areas. And it looks like a little cluster of flowers. So then you can come in with your pencil, and I tend to like to shade at the very bottom, so that little point in the center where they all kind of come together would be at the center of the box. And then just lightly soften. And like I said, these are really fun if you add just a hint of color. There you go. So now we have some flowers. And obviously they're not necessarily flowers per se, but you've got some flowers. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of finish off this tile a little bit. And I'm simply going to create an aura around this. Right? So I've got these little flowers. And this would be a perfect tile to add a kind of a little bit of a border too, but I don't want to do a full border on this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of do a little, almost like crosshatch of some lines in each corner. Okay, so I've got these little random spaces that I'm now going to go in and I'm going to add some of these little squishy balloons into, which is actually going to look like I have little piles of stones in each corner. We'll draw one more line right there. And a lot of times I kind of eyeball it, or I pretend I have another line right there to fill out that shape. You can also leave them kind of open if you'd prefer, so you've only created like a three-sided rock as if it's gone off the edge of the page. I am a firm believer in taking each pattern and making it your own. I think that we become so ingrained into drawing patterns a specific way or a certain way that we forget that you can let your imagination just kind of run free and take these patterns and make them into anything you want to. So I'm just shaded a little bit here on the bottom. These little stones, little pebbles. I have enough graphite on my tortillon to finish these off up here on the top. And then obviously I could do some more tangling in the background if I wanted to, but I kind of like it just like that. Sometimes it's okay to embrace the negative space. Alright, so then the last thing I'm going to do is we are going to look at it as a fill pattern. So I like to kind of throw these ideas at you, and I always move really fast during my Facebook Lives. During a regular class, obviously I go much slower, but the goal of these lives is to just kind of give you a bunch of ideas so that you can take the pattern and feel free to play with it, kind of mix it up, and do the things that, you know, maybe you haven't tried before with us. So I just want to encourage you to do exactly that. So we're going to do a line across the tile. We're going to leave kind of a big space, like I'm going to say a solid finger width. And I'm going to make an aura. And then I'm actually doing halaba, right? So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to make another. And then I'm going to make an aura there. And I'm not going to make a really complicated halaba. I'm just going to do maybe 3. Okay. And now I'm going to come into any of these ribbons. So I'm going to pick this big one in the beginning. And I'm going to create a tiny little aura on either side, on the inside of that ribbon. And now I am going to make my crisscross lines. So I'm just kind of going at it from every direction, and then I'm going to come at it so that I have sort of something that's kind of grid-ish. It's not a grid per se, but I've got these little lines that are kind of broken up. Making sure I hit my edges. And now I'm going to come in and I'm going to fill in these little spaces with my squishy balloons. Okay, so I've got this pattern inside a pattern. So now we've used it kind of as an inside piece, and we've used it as an outside piece. And it doesn't have to be halaba, it could be anything. You could fill muka with this. I have. It actually is one of my favorites to do. You kind of make a little muka and then make it look like it was made out of rock. So I'm just going to do the one for today. Don't hesitate to kind of put them in spirals or to, you know, do just about anything with these. Anywhere you could make, you know, something that looks like a checkerboard or filled with Knightsbridge, you could use in Zeppel instead. I tend to use it, I like to mix it with organics. So your poke leaf, your poke root, your mucka, your flux, any of those patterns tend to work really nicely with this because, like I said, I tend to think of it as garden stones. And I know that not everybody thinks of each pattern the same way, but if you do think of it in a specific way, kind of think what things go with it. So I'm just kind of softening these. I will post my pattern sheet a little later today, and that will have the finished tiles and a collage for you to kind of use as a reference. Once I have something like this done, I often come in and I shade on the inside of that little tiny skinny aura that I put there, and then I just soften it so that it looks like it's kind of sunken in, and then I would shade my hollow bar the same way as I normally would. So let me see here, we'll do one, we'll finish this up, this one strip, and then we will be done for the day. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, so here are some of the examples of Zeppel done in some different ways that we played with today. I'm gonna scroll out just a little bit there for you. Thank you for joining me this morning. It was really good to be back. And if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out. Don't hesitate to do so. Sandra, I see that you are interested in the classes, and I will actually add you to my newsletter, and I'll forward that right over for you. It's got all the information in there. I hope everyone has a wonderful Saturday, and I will see you next week.